Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another monthly episode of AUA Ask Us Anything. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, Denny,
Good
what's
seeing
going on?
you.
Hey.
Yeah. So I see you every Saturday. I'm very happy with that.
Pretty much, yeah, that's about right. Yeah, with your online exercise group
Yeah.
doing I Ching Jing, stretching exercises. Well, not so much stretching anymore, but yeah, and then working with Chi and
Yeah, it
yes,
has
and breathing
evolved. It has
exercise.
evolved.
Yes,
Yeah, we'll talk about that at the end of the show, and maybe next
yes.
week we do one on Qi and Dao Yin and that stuff, that kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah. So you pick a topic, or you pick a list of topics, and then we kind of zero into this thing called the MEC uh, mindfulness. Can you give us a little bit of background? Why did you pick that topic, and what is sort of the common understanding of what that means?
That's a great question. I think it's a fairly popular book. I haven't actually read it, but it made a lot in the media. It's McMindfulness. I forget the subtitle and the author. Apologies. That can be looked up, and we'll include that in the show notes. And then we also call this what were you saying? McMindfulness and the Mindfulness Industrial Complex, right? So it's basically I like to look at it as just kind of the popularity of mindfulness. So we there's good and bad things about that, and the book goes into a lot of criticism on mindfulness and how it's being used, probably improperly. Boy, I don't even know where to start on this. But the term actually itself comes from kind of comparing it to McDonald's, right? It's kind of prepackaged. The mindfulness has been prepackaged and just kind of, it's the same whether you get a burger at McDonald's, no matter what country in the world you're in. It's pretty much the same standard processes. So it's kind of like stripped down, watered down, possibly version, not really, sometimes out of context. And I'm just going to start rambling here until I have Denny get me on track, because there's really so much to tackle with this.
I think in general, I think United States is very good in identifying and solving first world problem. All right, we say first world problem. We think that these are important problems, but actually, there's a lot of people out there whose life is centered around much more essential things, right? So I think America has this history of taking things from a different culture and very quickly adopting it to our needs, quote unquote, our needs, which is what I call first world needs. So I don't think Josh and I are here to wanted to criticize, what someone might call mindfulness. My thought always is that as a Buddhist practitioner, I don't want to think about what's right or wrong. I just want to think about what's right for me and what's not right for me, right? So I think when we talk about mindfulness, with the context that it's like the fast food, but fast food has its place. Fast food has its place. Fast food, is addressing a need. Something. Someone told me that the fast food in the United States is really finger food. It's like how we serve breakfast in McDonald's and all these other fast food places, that it has to be eaten in one hand, and that would be American breakfast. So we have a way of really identifying needs and addressing them, even if we have to take something from foreign. So mindfulness is definitely one of those. And I remember we had a discussions early on when Master Jiru wanted to started the academy in Maba, and I remember he and I were traveling, and I said, Master, you need to call it academy and not an institute, because academy has this idea that it's a place for training and all that, and then I stopped there. I didn't want to go beyond, in terms of finding a name. So eventually he found the name of Right Mindfulness Training Academy. And I remember we had a discussion, and I kind of raised the question. It wasn't like an objection or anything. I just thought that the word mindfulness is overused. That's one of the problem with branding, is that you have to find something that is that people can relate to, but not so much that they have a preconception of what it is, you know.
And
So that's why, like when we talk about our Saturday class, and Josh mentioned how it's every day evolves, every day evolves, and so right now we focus more on fitness, because that's a term that people can really understand now. What does fitness mean, right? Especially now that we've been at home, for a good 9 months now. Fitness becomes very important, and so the question is, can you elevate that to just not physical fitness and mental fitness? So this is sort of a roundabout way of saying whatever mindfulness means, I believe it has its place. I'm not
well,
here to
that's the thing.
criticize.
So it does have, there's positive or pros and cons to it. The about mindfulness being popularized, the good points is that, there's a lot more unwholesome and unskillful things people could be interested in. So just having that name out there, I feel, is helpful of mindfulness instead of, not being familiar with that term. I would say tons of people are familiar with the term mindfulness, which I feel is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And
So I feel like what Josh and I wanted to do is as if we're reintroducing the European cuisine, with the idea that the burgers and the fish has already been so ingrained into the thinking, right? And so rather than wasting our energy to criticize one, we just thought, hey, it opens the door. Let's have a discussion. And I think after reading Josh's comments and some of his thoughts on mindfulness, I thought, well, why don't we kind of structure a show around what we thought is the definition
yes,
of
that's where we've got to
mindfulness.
start because
Yeah,
some people might just think they know what it means, and so that's it. They know it, and then on to the next thing, right? Instead of
yeah,
actually delving into it and knowing what the actual meaning and origin
yeah,
comes from, and then
yeah,
also why it's worth really practicing and not just the
yeah,
surface level of it, just
yeah.
only the surface
It,
level.
it's ironic that the word mindfulness, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that comes from the Pali word sati, S-A-T-I, and then it translates into a Chinese word called nen. Nen is a combination of two words, which means now and the mind. So in that sense, it's a very good word in that it represents the the temple awareness, just bringing it now and here, which is very good. Except that as I mentioned many times, in the Chinese language, one word is ambiguous. You cannot have a precise meaning with just one character, because it really depends on what it conjugate with. So the problem that we have in the Western world, really defining the word mindfulness, reflects itself also in the Oriental or the Asian culture, in that there's so many different definitions of Nen, which is the equivalent of mindfulness. So anyway, why don't we just jump in, and I prepare some PowerPoint if it's okay. I'll run through it,
Sure.
and then we can have a discussion as we go. Um, let me share
Denny,
the
before you
screen.
get started, I'll just toss in a few things from of definitions, but I'm already familiar with Denny's definition, and I'm pretty much mostly on board with that. I just give you some other definitions from teachers
Sure,
here.
sure. Why
Um,
don't Let me
Go
see.
ahead. Sure.
Can you share screen, or do I have to give you permission?
Oh, no, no, I'm just reading from some notes I have previously. Sorry, I forgot to. So anyway, Bhikkhu Analayo calls mindfulness keep calmly knowing change. So KCKC, keep calmly knowing change. Gil Fronsdale, who's in the Bay Area, I think in Redwood City, close to, I guess, where Denny's at, a cultivation of clear, stable, non-judgmental awareness. And then this is from Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein about mindfulness, a little bit longer. Being aware of what's going on as it actually arises, not being lost in our conclusions or judgments about it, our fantasies of what it means, our hopes, our fears, our aversions. Rather, mindfulness helps us see nakedly and directly, this is what's happening right now. So that goes to Denny's thing. And then maybe towards the end, I'll come back with some classic metaphors from the suttas that the Buddha gives about different modes of mindfulness, different kind of illustrations about mindfulness. So.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Josh. I think thank you for that. And I think that and this kind of brings to the point that I think I like to go back to the original definition of
And
mindfulness.
Real quick, Denny, and
yeah.
then I'll hand it over. Sorry, I didn't.
Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
There's some other just like one word translations. Of course, for Sati, the one I find could be helpful too is bodyfulness. It's kind of a made up word, but it's not just the mind; it's the bodyfulness. Another one is the awareness, noticing. I'm blanking on some of the other ones, but those are some other. Awareness is another one, but all these kind of, there's not like a really complete one word definition. Okay, Denny, apologize.
Yeah, as you're
Denny does have
speaking,
one that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I'm thinking. Imagine yourself going to an opera and you want to describe the opera, and I give you a ticket. Okay. I don't think we would like to describe the entire opera and all the historical backgrounds and all that with just a ticket. The ticket is the ticket, right? I think it's what I have seen, and this is going back to what I said about the word mindfulness, is that it is so over-described, both by the Western culture and the Asian culture, that we're going beyond the ticket now. The mindfulness, the word mindfulness is a simple thing. It means remember. Now, if you don't have a way of remembering where your mind is, then what happens is that it's as if you don't have the ticket to go to see the opera. But it's also a mistake to think that you should just like take this ticket, this word called mindfulness, and try to jam all the ways of describing, practice into the word. So those things that you mentioned, I'm not saying that they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that they actually go beyond the word mindfulness. They're now more into, and I like to be able to do a show in the future about what's samatha and vipassana. And in fact, talk about that in the Asian context, especially in the Zen Buddhism, where they use the word called silent illumination. So what you describe, and these are the scholars who spend a lot of time explaining mindfulness, I believe they go beyond the original definition. They're now approaching the entire spectrum of the practice, talking about how to focus on your sensors, how to not follow your sensors, and we'll talk about that. This is very, very, very good topic, and I think today just talk about the original definition of mindfulness. And in fact, the original definition of mindfulness is in fact what Master Zhu teaches us. Okay, it's the ticket to the opera. All right, is that okay?
This is really important too, because it simplifies it. There's a saying that if it's not easy, it's not vipassana. But but with the remembering, one of the most simplest things on earth is, okay, yeah, I have a body, right? But how many times a day are we actually conscious of that until it's pointed out, until we remember that there is a body, right? It seems like the easiest, simplest thing in the world, but how can we constantly keep remembering that there's a body, right?
Well, one of the example I use, and I make fun of my students. I talk about my small army of Cantonese speaking grandmas, and so one of the things I remind them is two things. One is I said, how many times you check your purse when you go out? Every other 5 minutes, every other 15, 30 seconds. I mean, we check our purse constantly. We check our wallet constantly. Well, guess what? That's not something you are born with. You give something to a child and they don't check it. They don't check it. Okay?
Unless it's a
but we check
smartphone.
it.
Unless it's a smartphone. Now that's
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
That's
we check it
constantly being
constantly
checked. Yes.
because that's an acquired skill, is to remember, where your wallet is, where your purse is, where your iPhone. That's an acquired skill. Ironically, we don't have that skill, just like you said, Josh, in terms of checking to see where our mind is. It's like we're driving with the 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the gas pedal, and we're pushing them together, or not knowing which one is which. We don't constantly say, okay, left foot should not be on the pedal and the right foot is pressing down on the accelerator. That's all we're talking about. Is just to remember. The other one the other example I use is mostly my students are grandmothers. I say, well, when you take your grandkids to school, that's part of what they do, because it's a multi-generational family, and so the grandparents take the grandkids to school. I said, how do you cross the street? Do you hold the hands or do you not hold the hands? Of course you hold the hands. Why do you hold the hands? Well, because if you don't hold the hands, they run away, and then now they get kidnapped or they get run over by a car. It's very dangerous. Of course you hold their hand. There's not even a question. Well, how many times do you hold your mind? Right? That's what it is. Okay, so anyway, I want to start something. I want to, like in our practice, I always say, start from zero. Start from zero, right? Let's just start from zero. So I like to start from zero. So here's a slide that I prepare, and it's the topic of today's presentation, which is called McMindfulness, and with the subtitle "Mindfulness Industrial Complex." Right? that's probably not fair, but it's attention grabbing, right? It's we think of it as an industry, like the this industry, this mindfulness industry, is very, very good in identifying the first world problems. So what are the first world problems? So the first world problems are, especially now that we're shelter in place now for 9 months or more, it's all the things that you don't want and all the things that we have to live with every day. It's all the mental defects, right? Or what we call the mental unskillfulness. It's the fear, the phobia, the anxiety, the stress, the emotional trauma, post-stress, post-traumatic stress syndrome, grief, sadness, shame, frustration, anger, resentment, cravings, addictions, and chronic pain. You just go to any YouTube that talks about, all the, I found that list when I was looking to see if there are people who are practicing this padding of the meridian points, and it turns out that there's a growing industry of Western practitioners on that, and this is the list that I got from them, that you could solve that. So I'm not making this up. This is real. This is what we call McMindfulness, is that they're taking this mindfulness technique and they say, well, let's just address some first world problems, and the first world problems has to do with this long list and more. So the question is, what does mindfulness really means? What is the in the beginning, what does mindfulness mean? Well, mindfulness, the word comes from the Pali word called Sati. And the correct definition, or I shouldn't say correct, I should say the most original, most simple definition of Sati is to remember. That's what it means, is to remember. So let's look at the word. The word itself actually has been around for over 500 years. It actually starts with the French literature, and then eventually it bleeds into the English literature. But it wasn't used in the Buddhist context yet. And today it's used almost exclusively in the Buddhist context. And it was used in the Buddhist context about maybe 150, 140 years ago, and it was done by a Pali language scholar who was translating the suttas, and he came across this phrase in Pali called Sato Sapanyano, and he translates that into and Sato is sate, and he translates that into remember, being mindful and thoughtful. And when he say mindful, he says it means memory. Just remember where your mind is and be thoughtful, right? So what does the word sati? Why did Buddha choose the word sati to mean remembering? Well, the word sati actually is the name of a princess. It's the name of a Hindu goddess, and the story was that there was a king and a queen. Back then, there were a lot of small kingdoms, so this probably not a huge kingdom, probably just a small king and queen. And they have everything. They have wealth, they have power, they have lots of sons. They don't have a daughter. So they went to this goddess and they said, we really like to have a daughter. We pray to have a daughter. And the goddess says, okay, well, I can be your daughter. So she reincarnated into their family. But before that, she said, but you have to promise me that if I ever become your daughter, you cannot disrespect me. You cannot disrespect me. But because if you do, I will leave you. I will return to the heaven, and I would disown you, meaning that you would lose all your wealth and power. So this is the price you have to pay. So that's sure. So we'll never disrespect you. Why would we ever do that? And so she became her daughter. She was a beautiful girl, except that she has this thing. And there's a parallel story of that in the Chinese. Okay, so that there was an incarnation of Guan Yin that was the princess that she was beautiful, but she didn't like the life of abundance, and instead she likes to practice. And so Sati was like that, and she eventually married a male god, a very famous male god called Shiva, which is one of the three gods. And in the Hindu religion, they don't have a god. They actually have a division of labor, and so they actually have three gods. And so they have a god who were like the creator, kind of equivalent to the Christians' creative God. And there's another one who's an administrator of God of universe, and then Shiva is supposed to be the destroyer. Now, I never understood why you would need a god to destroy the world, except that when I think about it, and I remember one time Master told me, he says, one of the strongest destroying power in the universe is called conditions. In other words, just when you think that something is good and you wanted to keep it forever, no. Something else would come along, and then the conditions that held it together would fall apart, and then it would disappear and get destroyed. And then the same thing, just when you think that things are going really bad, the right condition will come along, and then something goes better. That's what we call impermanence. And so I believe that Shiva has something to do with that. And he's not like he's evil and he's go out there and destroy the universe. It's just that he represents that interconnectedness, right? That right conditions come along, right conditions go away. But anyway, in the Indian tradition, they have these different castes, and Shiva was from a very low caste. So of course the emperors didn't like that. The kings and queens didn't like that. And so one time the king was having a birthday party, and he purposely did not invite Sati and his husband. So Sati showed up anyway, and he confronted his father and says, "Why did you disrespect me? Why did you disrespect my husband?" And so he just turned into flame, because that was the promise. So Buddha used that word sati to mean remember. So she has such good memory. So of course today Sati means something else. Sati it's a outlaw ritual where if a husband die and he's being cremated, then the wife would jump into the fire, and that's not allowed. Anyway, that's what Sati means. Sati means remember.
I like if I could jump in there with the comment about that. I love how
yes, please,
the
John.
Buddha he took popular terms of the time, his day, and he redefined them, which I thought was revolutionary too. And this he just kind of takes all the drama out of that story with still having the context and having it related to that. He takes it even to a nobler purpose of that without kind of the destroying nature of Shiva. Overtly, but I don't know. That's just one interpretation, right?
Yes. He's very good in that. You would argue that even I'll talk about the 12 links of dependent origination, and you would argue that that was something that he repurposed too.
Yes, and the thing was that he, if I'm getting this right, he was said to rediscover Sati. He didn't invent it. He remembered, but I don't know if that's accurate, because how could the human race possibly forget about remembering? I know it's really strange. I don't know if that has anything, and maybe that's some other topic for research later. But
yeah. I guess on some level you would say that we remember everything. So the question is not so much remembering, but to really bring it to the forefront of your spectrum of remembrance, right?
Yes, and remembering that's a whole vast topic in itself, not to mention how that works and the processes of it and different types of it. It's a really big topic.
Correct. So now what I want to say is that when we talk about mindfulness, I might as well talk about vipassana and Zen Buddhism, because it's everything, right? And one of the things that I hope someday we'll talk about that is that once the Buddhist practice, the meditation practice comes to the Western world, people then start to associate names. Okay, so when people say, "Oh, this is mindfulness practice, and this is vipassana practice, and this is Zen practice," they think that. So one of the kind of underlying assumption is that you only practice mindfulness over here, and you only practice vipassana over here, and you only practice Zen over here, which is not true at all. Which is not true. The mindfulness and the vipassana and the Zen, which is really the word Zen comes from Chan comes from Chana, which comes from jhana. These things have to. They are. You can't have. You cannot have one without the other, right? So yes, I want to just
they overlap and intersect.
Yeah, I want to talk about very quickly is that mindfulness meditation is a technique, but mindfulness itself is a building block. Okay, so I want to just quickly go back to what we call the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path has these 8 things. Everybody knows that. But they're actually separate into 3 different parts, 3 different segments. And the first segment is, in the lack of a better word, I just call it morality. Right? Morality just means, your own integrity. It doesn't necessarily mean morality in the Western world where there's an overhanging authority that determines whether it's right or wrong.
Some people say ethics, yeah.
Yeah, ethics and integrity. Now, I find it interesting that one time in Chinese, Master gave a lecture on the Eightfold Path, and of course, there's a different word for that, which kind of separate into the 3 levels of learning. And he said, and I liked what he said. He said, well, think of sila. Sila is a Pali word for ethics and morality. Think of that as a language. Think of that as a common language. It's the language that you would have common with good teachers. So if in your practice, if you want to have the opportunity to meet good teachers, you must first have your own integrity or morality. Because a good teacher would not be interested in working with you. It's a language. It's a language. So in this case, sila or morality means that it's really your action. It's your bodily action. It's your speech. It's what you do, right? Are you practicing compassion, loving kindness? Are you practicing
non-harming at the core, right?
Yeah, not harming.
Yes.
So are you practicing the 5 precepts, which the first one is, don't kill. And then the other one is livelihood. Is your work considered wholesome, right? So they discourage you from being a butcher. They discourage you from, working for a company. If you were an engineer, they discourage you from, working in a company that does nothing but weapons. That would not be good. So it's a whole list of things, and so this falls into the integrity, the morality part, and Master has a way of saying that, well, that's just a language. That's a language. It's a common language, right? Then he goes on, he says, well, the second part, and this is where mindfulness fits in, is called samadhi, and as different to samatha. And samadhi, one can translate into meditation. Is a tough word to translate. And here you have right mindfulness, as a building block, concentration. So samadhi is actually more like concentration. Concentration is one can say is sustained mindfulness. That's another way you can say. And right effort is there's a whole thing that has to do with maintaining skillfulness. And what's interesting is Master says, well, that's a common language too. That's a language that you would have in common with all the positive energy in the universe. So now we're talking about beyond this realm that we live in, that's called the kama realm, the realm of desire. So if you're a purified mind and now you reside in a different realm, the rupa and the arupa realm, then you're no longer contaminated. And so these are the bodhisattva, or maybe in the Christians we call them the angels, and all the good positive energy. And so Master says, well, if you want to have a common language with that, then you have to have a technique, a skill sets that calms your mind. And finally, it's the achievement which is called panya. And some people say wisdom, some people say insight, some people just meant contemplation. It's hard to translate. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that mindfulness as a word is really the ticket to the opera. Okay, it's the beginning, and actually, Master talks about that, and he says, you got to start with mindfulness. With the right mindfulness, then you have the right awareness. With the right awareness, then you can have the right wisdom, right insight. And so the uniqueness about Master's teaching is that you have to maintain this mindfulness, you have to maintain this remembrance, okay? You have to do that. But you have to do it at all time, not just when you're sitting, and not just and you have to do it when you're moving. Now, what's interesting then is that he talks a great deal about the 4 postures. So you have to practice mindfulness in all 4 postures: standing, sitting, lying down, and walking. And actually, the Chinese word is not just posture; it's like the 4 royal posture. So I thought about this. I said, why elevate that? It's just postures. Why do you elevate that into this level? Then I realized that it's the human being. Only the human being can have all postures, all 4 postures.
Yes, it's what defines us as a human. That's right. Besides in
Yeah,
our
it's what
opposable,
defines us as human.
thumb in speech too. That real quick comment here. I love that idea about language, and I learned that language through mindfulness because I had no. I mean, maybe I'll share my personal story sometime if it's relevant. I do on one-to-one basis, but just generally speaking, I just didn't have the capacity to know the sila, how I was behaving or how I was looking at the world and treating myself and treating others until I started doing mindfulness and remembering. It was more like a traditional type of remembering at first before I had any instructions of all the things that happened in the past that I just hadn't processed yet. So then I saw the importance of ethical behavior, and it's not like a drudgeful duty. It's for your own happiness and well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a language because people that practice that and move in that and are well versed in that, they can immediately relate and know what each other are talking about. Pretty much,
Yeah.
And the four postures, and even the transition between the four postures, that's even challenging as well. But those
Yeah.
are you would think those are the most simplistic things on earth. Yet again, how many times are we full at least a bare awareness in our conscious in the forefront of our mind of what posture we're in? Until I started talking about it, I wasn't really aware that I was sitting here. Or sitting as opposed to standing, walking, or lying down. It's a remembering of the posture you're in. So why
Thank you
is
for
that so difficult? That's what I was fascinated by. Why is something so simple one of the most challenging things there is?
Yes. Thank you for that, Josh. That brings up an important point in that very often we think about Buddhist teaching as this linear model. So when you say it's Eightfold Path, well, tell me for the first one, let me do that, and then I graduate to the second, and then eventually I'll get to the end. And so, but it's not exactly. It's not. It's all intermingled. So just mindfulness. Even though we put that in the second tier and we say, well, that's the building block for samadhi. Actually, you have to have mindfulness throughout. And I think what Josh said is that even in practicing sila, practicing your morality, integrity, and how your actions in both verbal and physical can affect other requires mindfulness, right? It's everywhere. So thank you for that. That's very important. Now, what's interesting is that this word right is everywhere. So it's not just that we have to have mindfulness, we have to have the right mindfulness. And it's not just that we have to have concentration, it has to have the right concentration. So I remember Master talk about this. What makes it right? Now in Pali is samma, S-A-M-M-A. So when we say sati is samma sati. When we say samadhi is samma samadhi. So the word samma is always there. And so what does samma mean? What does right mean? And so Master explained that. It's very simple. If you are free of your hindrances, then it's right. If you are free of your hindrances, then you are in fact, on the path towards witnessing the four Dhamma seal, and you're then on the right path, right? So everything you do has to lead you there. And so if you could have mindfulness, but if the mindfulness is about killing, I mean, come on, if you're a sharpshooter, you got to have mindfulness.
Or a thief, to pull off a heist.
Or a thief. I'm not saying a sharpshooter is necessarily unwholesome. If the person is defending me and he's defending invader, I accept that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that just because you have a gun that makes it a bad person, right? There's always a place for that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that mindfulness sometimes can bring out these unwholesome, bring out these hindrances. So when we say right, it's very specific. It's when you are free of these five hindrances. So let me talk about just quickly what does five hindrances mean? And we don't have any time to go into this, but if we ever talk about mental consciousness, when we talk about the five skandhas, and eventually it creates the mental consciousness, then in the Buddhist teaching, it breaks it down into the 51 mental factors, and some of them are neutral, and some of them are wholesome, and some of them are unwholesome. And more than as much as 2/3 of the 51 mental factors are considered unwholesome. And if you take that and you group it, then that becomes the 5 hindrances. So these are the totality of the unwholesome or unskillful mental factors. So what are they? The most important one is called clinging. So Buddha, in the wheels of life, he represents clinging or attachment by a bird. And once upon a time, there was this bird that people keep as a pet. But when the owner dies, the bird would die. The bird would just give up all reasons to survive. And because they cling to the loving care of the owner so much that they see no reasons to live. And so Buddha uses that as a symbol for clinging. Clinging means that we have these sensations in the body, right? Our body is made up of the 6 sense doors, 6 sense roots: eye, nose, mouth, ear, touch the body, plus our mind, our brain. So not only that we have sensations that we like, we have feelings that we like, and so we cling to that, right? And we cling to that, like they saran wrap. We cling to a bowl of potato salad or whatever. So then, when you don't get what you like, when things move, change because of impermanence, then you have a reaction, and typically we react negatively. And so that would be the second hindrance, is called anger. And so Buddha represents that by a snake, right? Because if you step on a snake, the snake is not going to say, "Oh, he didn't mean that." No. He's going to react negatively and bite you. So he represents that by the snake. So typically we go on with the list, and the rest of it is there are, after the anger, you either go into depression, or what we call sleepiness, right? Lack of energy, or you go to the other extreme, which is anxiety. So one is, so if you I teach mechanical engineering, so I used to teach, I used to explain the difference between action and activities. So anxiety is when you have lots of activities but no action, because it's a scalar property, not a vectorial property. You just go crazy here. So then finally is doubt, is lack of faith, right? So these are the 5 hindrances. So then.
Denny, can I just give a few comments on these? These
yes,
are real
please, John.
important.
Yes.
Anger, more specifically, I'm partial to ill will, because in general, obviously we can see the destructive properties of anger, but sometimes anger can be, it could come from a place of care. You're angry about how someone is harming someone else, right? Doesn't mean you want to go and do the same kind of behavior, but it's because ill will, I think, is more specific, because that involves wanting to harm someone, right?
I think that's a very, very good point. I actually, when I was picking up this slide, I was going back and forth, and I prefer ill will as well, as opposed to anger. You're right. I mean, sometimes we have to have anger when you want to stand up for righteousness.
It seems like a natural thing, but it all depends. It's like a double-edged sword, right? It can.
I agree that. What is the intention?
Exactly, and even if we start bringing up anger, then sometimes it can even lead to more anger. But then if we suppress it and shove it back, well, then we can just reach a boiling point and explode. So it's a really tricky thing. The depression and anxiety, the classic terms for this are like some big $2 words like sloth and torpor. Yeah, it's just kind of this like. Yeah, and that's especially when in meditation practice, when the energy is really down. And there's ways to deal with these too. And then the anxiety, I think they use restlessness and restlessness and worry. And doubt's the really tricky one though too, because it comes pretending as wisdom. It comes masquerading as something wise, but it's not. It's a false thing. So
yeah. Yeah. So we need to talk about this. This is worthy of another discussion,
for sure.
because
There's been
I
books
want
written
to
on
dig
those, yeah.
deeper into Master's teaching in terms of how you overcome these 5 hindrances in the way of so we in the Chinese word is I call it losing fire and gaining mara. So there's 2 ends, right? Losing fire is like you losing oxygen to your brain. So then how do you keep up the chi? So the whole point about practicing chi is to make sure that your body is full of oxygen and you're not dozing off. And so that's why you need chi. Okay, you can't. So that's why. So Master actually, in terms of practice, Master actually say, if you go into that mode, then that's called lazy Zen. And then if you go on the other mode, the anxiety part, again, I use more of the common words here. The one you use is more accurate in that that's what happened there is that your 5 sensors are calm, your ear, your nose, your mouth, and so, except that now your sixth sense, which is your brain, is active. And so the way to deal with that is something very important, which is how do you rest your brain, right? So this is good stuff. This is really good stuff. So I just want to kind of mention, so I'm now kind of going a little beyond the basic definition of mindfulness and going a little bit deeper now into the practice. And so what does mindfulness mean now? How does Master teaches mindfulness? So next one is interesting. It's really about how do you stay away from the 5 hindrances, because it's not something. It's not like you say I stay away from it and that's it, because you can't. You're trying to get rid of. You're trying to stay away from using your brain, so you can't really just use your brain to stay away from the brain. That doesn't. It takes technique. So that now I'm getting deeper into the technique.
And these, they can also be looked at as opportunities for mastery too, because not until we experience them and deal with them and address them can we overcome them. So it's just like dukkha. We have to know dukkha to end dukkha as well, right?
So I want to kind of explain. I really I've done a lot of work in explaining Master's teaching in Chinese. So this is my first attempt into taking some of that and translating into English. So one of the important ways of understanding Master's teaching, especially in terms of how he practiced mindfulness and how he practiced right mindfulness, meaning how does he stay away? What do we do to stay away from the hindrances? Is to understand how a mind process work. And so he uses this thing called the 12 nadanas, or the 12 links of dependent origination. Again, this is something that the historical Buddha have repurposed. Okay, he didn't invent that. All he did was he took that, and rather than talking about how the physical part of a body, the rebirth from that, he uses it to talk about the mind. How does the mind work? And one of the things that I know, and once I show this, then everybody says, "Oh, I know what that means." I want to spend a little bit of time again. So it's the same way that I try to bring the word mindfulness back to its original definition. I like to bring the word ignorance back to its original definition. So if you look at the Pali word for ignorance, is avijja. Okay, so it's made of 2 words, very important, and I put a little dot in between.
I've heard it pronounced avijja.
Avijja, thank you. So it's made of 2 words, avijja. Okay, now A typically means the opposite or beyond. So it's not always opposite. It's one of the 3 important sound. Hum. And home. So those are the 3 basic sounds. And is the feminine part of the universe. So it's so agama, the agama teaching. Gama means leave, because the 5 disciples had left Buddha, and Buddha wants them to come back. So it's called agama, come back. we talk about Anuttara, Samasambuddha. Anuttara. Nuttara means the well learned, like the Arahant, and Anuttara means beyond that, right? Things like we talk about the Buddha, Amatayu. That's the celestial Buddha, and it means amatam. It means it's beyond space and beyond time. Okay, so A means it's opposite or beyond, right? So you say Vitra, Avitra, is that right?
Avijja.
Avitra. So what does Vitra mean? What does Vitra mean? So there, we talk about this. I wrote about this. That there's the 10 epithet of Buddha. There's 10 different honorary terms that we use, but they're not really honorary terms as much as they represent different aspects of Buddha's accomplishment. For example, Buddha is one. Arahant is another. I talk about Anuttara, that's another one. Samasambuddha, that's another one. So there's another one called Vitra Karali Sampanya. Okay, so Sampanya in this case means perfection. And it's a perfection of clarity and perfection of his conduct. Okay, so Vitra in this case means clarity, that he can see beyond the what do we call that? Our world, right? So in this case, avitra means opposite. It means opposite. Someone who cannot see clearly. So ignorance in this case means all of the unwholesome seeds, right? So earlier we talked about the mental factors, which are how you would take the mental consciousness. When the brain actually generates the electrical signal, and so you can break that down into the building blocks, and these are called the mental factors. Now, so they would cause, if the right conditions arises, they would cause physical action. But actually, because the electrical signal, there's a copy of that. Those actually get stored. Those thoughts get stored, and that's what we call karma. Okay, so then the karma is like seeds. So you have to think of this as so the word dependent origination. There's never been a good definition of that, but what it really means is that actions. You can. I use the example of as growing tomato. So if you take a tomato seeds, if you didn't have a tomato seeds, you wouldn't have tomato. If you didn't have a cause, you wouldn't have a result. But it takes condition. Okay, so the independent origination talks about the conditions that has to arise in order for something to become something. But it also talks about something else. This is something that's not talked about very, very much, which is that, imagine going back to the tomato again. You start with a single tomato seeds. If you put in the right conditions, it grows into a vine, and then now eventually you have a tomato, and you consume the tomato, and then you leave behind seeds. So when we say ignorance, those are seeds that are in your consciousness. They're the karmic seeds. And so this 12 links of dependent origination really talks about how all of our actions are not dictated by outside. So when a person bombs a city, he might leave behind a set of documents that talks about how dissatisfied he is with the world. In fact, that is conditions. What really start is his karmic seeds, that he has the anger seeds. He has an angry person is angry because he has the angry seeds, and he let it germinate. Okay, so that all comes from the ignorance of vitra. Now, that's just a seed, and then the seed has to become a consciousness by this thing called the sankhara, or the cosmic formations. So now the third part. So you start with the seed. The seed goes into your mental machinery, and it creates a consciousness. How to create something, a desire to kill. That has to enter into your mind. This is called the Nama Rupa. So this is really where your mind is. Your mind has two parts. There has the metaphysical part, which is what we call the seven consciousness. That's a self. Next to that is your brain. So this is the part where it activates your brain, and then it starts to put your body in action. And then eventually it contacts the outside world. That creates, and then eventually it creates feeling, which is your brain working again. And then eventually it goes back to creating more karmic seeds. So Master's teaching is all about what's between contact and feeling. So he focused a lot on contact. Contact is when your five senses interacts with the world without and not yet activating your brain. Because once they activate your brain, you develop like and dislike. That's yourself. And then it just goes on to this endless loop. So in Master's teaching, it's all about contact. It's all about how you train yourself, be mindful of your breath, be mindful of your body, knows that wholesome or unwholesome thoughts come out. And as soon as you know it, you stop it. You don't follow. You don't follow. So this is Master's teaching. So what I try to say here, so far what I try to do is try to bring out the most basic definition of mindfulness. It's that it's a ticket to the opera. It doesn't mean anything else other than to remember. Now, from that, there are different techniques. And Master's technique is about making what's called the right, sama, which is to learn to stay away from the five hindrances. So Josh, you wanted to add something?
Well, yeah, the link and dependent originate. I mean, this dependent origination. There's whole series of hours and hours of talks just addressing this, and just penetrating into one of these links is a whole. I mean, it can be part of your practice for a long time, and it's really cool how. Shifu focuses on contact. A lot of the teachers, I guess in the insight tradition, they think the access point, or they say the access point is feeling, and I can see that as well. And then again, these teach going one way, but then also tracing back or reverse engineering going the other way too. So that link right there, or that connection between feeling and contact, to explore that, to know that, and focus on that, especially between feeling and contact, it's a really important one. The other thing I wanted to say was looking up here. We read the book What the Buddha Taught by Wapala Rahula. I'm not pronouncing the first name. Right, classic book, good jumping in point for just about anybody. And he, this was in the Pali's the diploma class at Maba, and he translates dependent arising or codependent arising as conditioned Genesis, and I thought that was really interesting term, conditioned Genesis. So like Genesis means when something, how something starts and gets underway, the beginning of it, and then the conditioned part, is all the things that go into how, making that possible or not possible. So yeah, that's what I've got on this. But
yeah.
I mean,
so I think it was a month ago we talked a little bit about Zen Buddhism. And we talk about how the meditation technique went from China into Japan, and how it actually went there first time through Korea and the second time directly into Japan. And that became the two different schools. The last one being Soto, and the first one, I believe, you know how to pronounce it. What's the first one? Ranzan?
Rinzai. Is it Rinzai?
Rinzai. So Rinzai came to Japan first, and actually when Rinzai meditation came to Japan, that changes the social structure in Japan, and it took all the power away from the royalties and give it to the samurais, and eventually you have shoguns. And that wasn't until General Admiral Perry opened up the ports when he was sent by President Roosevelt, that the Japanese woke up and says we can't have this anymore, and so they reversed the process and eliminate the shogun class and then elevate it back to the imperial court. But the reason that there was this change, 1,500 years ago, when it went from essentially the landowners, which are the royalties, to essentially the meritocratic class, the samurais, is because of this distinction, this understanding of contact and feeling. Is that the samurais understand that if they know how to suppress their hindrances, they know how to suppress their own feeling, then the reactions time go up. The reaction time go up. So that's why when you watch these old samurai movies, you could see these two samurai standing there in the rain, waiting for each other, and then when the right time they cut each other up, and their sword is so fast that when they're done, there's no blood on the blade, and that's why they can put it back right away. They don't have to wipe it. So if you watch the Western movie, after they kill somebody, they have to clean it. Right, and that is all because they understood meditation, and they understood mindfulness, and they understood how they only have contact. So they're fully aware of the environment, and as soon as the other person move, or they would take advantage of that. And the reason why they can react so fast, or faster than the other person, is that they are more capable of suppressing. Or actually put it more accurately, they're capable of being liberated from their own hindrances.
And this is what some teachers say, that the samatha practice, or at least the way some people teach it temporarily suppresses the hindrances, right? So you get that taste of freedom immediately, but then as soon as you stop practicing, they can come back. So
that's why the four postures is so important.
Yes, and so that builds that muscle.
And the distinction between what in motion and in stillness is so important.
Yes,
that's why the teaching from Master is so profound.
It is. Like he combines the samatha and vipassana. We've got that as a note to do a whole show on, which most people isolate, or a lot of teach those completely separate, which I see benefit in that too. But when those can be joined, and a lot of times those are joined by anapanasati practice as well. But and Master has his own kind of unique flavor and version and teachings on how to do that as well.
Yeah. So let me just go to the last slide, and because we're over. So now we're going beyond the definition of mindfulness, and now going towards the practice of mindfulness. So the most famous of that is there's a sutta called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. In Pali, is Sati Patanya, or there's another way which is called Sati Upatanya. So one means attention and one means foundation. So the Theravada typically use foundation. So these are the four foundations of mindfulness. Now again, most people, when they look at that and they say, oh, so just tell me where to start and where to finish. And so they think of these four as four different progression, where in fact they're not. They're not. So anyway, we practice what is called mindfulness of the body. And again, there's a huge misunderstanding what that means, because it's so trivial. What's there to? Well, first of all, in this case, body doesn't mean body. Body means your physical existence. So again, it goes back to the six sense roots. It's not just your eye, your nose, your ear, your mouth, and your body, but it's also your brain. Right? It's also your brain.
In the original sutta, the mindfulness of the body is divided into 6 parts, right? It's the breathing, the postures, the movement, the 4 elements, the 32 parts of the body, and then the cemetery contemplations. So that's breaks it down, just the body part.
Yes,
in the original.
Yes. Well, we need to talk about that. At least in terms of what George, we're not gonna say here's Master's teaching, follow it. That's not what we're trying to do. This is more our own interpretation, understanding, right? Okay. So one last slide, and then we're a little over time. That's okay. This brings to our Saturday. This brings to our Saturday class now, and before, let me prefix that by saying that we live in a modern world. In the modern world, one of the distinctions in the modern world is that we have freedom of information, freedom of communications. So, in the old days, when it's not so easy to communicate, when it's difficult to even have a book, because you have to handwrite them or what you find is that you have a lot of silos. This is the Buddhist teaching. This is the Taoist teaching. This is the the yogi teaching, and so forth and so on. And even within the Buddhist teaching, so this is the Theravada teaching, like we talked about, previously, and this is the Chinese teaching. This is Tibetan teaching. I think one has to understand that this is from the days when there was a lack of communication, a lack of representation of the knowledge. We need to walk away from that. So as much as there should be doctors without borders, we should have practitioners without borders. So it's not important for us to say whether that is Taoist teaching or Buddhist teaching. So what I have here is in fact Taoist teaching. It's in fact Taoist teaching. So now, a quick word on Taoist. So Taoist is a native religion of China, as opposed to Buddhist, which is imported. And so the Taoist goes back many as far back as maybe 4,000 years ago. But until Bodhidharma came along, and in fact, there was a very famous master of the Taoists that were born about 500 years after Bodhidharma. Until Bodhidharma came along, the Taoists were alchemists. So when we think about dantian, the word dan means fire. So when you swallow a pill, however you made it, a physical pill, you swallow the dan. Okay, so of course, once they understood the meditation, the world changes. Okay, so they become meditators. And so in the Taoist perspective of existence, translated into more modern language, is the three things: material, energy, and get this, information. So the material is a body, the energy is a chi, and the information is a mind. This is
toss in consciousness there too.
Consciousness is information. Consciousness is information. One of the I like to in the future I like to talk about how science and Buddhism converge, and there's so much to talk about. Well, one of the things that one can talk about is Stephen Hawking, and his famous contribution is called the information paradox, and he talks about the black hole radiation. And so you can kind of talk about that in the Buddhist context, is what happened to our body, in what realm does a body exist, and if you go beyond that realm, what's there? Well, that's energy. But what if you go beyond the rupa and the arupa? Well, then you're pure information. You enter into what modern scientists call the black hole. But up until Stephen Hawking, you cannot escape the black hole. Once you're in, you're in. And Stephen Hawking is the one that says, no, you can enter and come back, but what comes back is information.
Denny, you should probably just read what's on the screen, just in case anyone's just listening to. And
so I want to.
It's a whole other topic as well.
Exactly. Thank you. I got carried away.
No, that's good. I like that. Yes.
Okay. So basically, it says that our existence has three parts. Has the body, which is the material part. Has the chi, which is the energy. And then has the mind, which is information. So the Taoists believe that the beginning of the practice is when you become mindful of your body. And only when you're mindful of your body and you start to develop a coherence in the electrical field, then you have the horizon of the magnetic field, which is your energy. So that's the first stage, is how do you develop your body? How do you practice your body to bring out the chi? The second part is that how do you practice the chi to discover your own mind? And then finally, I didn't make this up, this is all from Taoist teaching, is that how do you then liberate your mind to enter the void? They call the void, which in our case is the emptiness.
I actually like the term emptiness more than in the void. But I mean,
yeah, except that I translate literally. That's a problem.
I see. Yeah, it gives. I mean, they're definitely similar and overlapping. Point to each other, kind of. Yeah. So that's a whole.
That's a lot. We can talk about this. This is ongoing. This is what we do now on Saturday. Is the reason we do this on Saturday now? I do it more on the Cantonese than I do on the English, because in the English I assume everybody is the beginner, whereas in the Chinese, every day we have new student, and so I need to break it up into 3 parts and just let them follow the first part, which is to develop the chi, and then to say, okay, that's enough. You practice that now. Bring out the more advanced student, and now we take the chi and we settle our mind, right?
Yeah, and because the emptiness teachings, they're not for everybody. You don't want to teach people about emptiness if they're not ready for it as well.
Correct.
So,
correct.
Yep.
Correct. So let me unshare this.
And then let me give those. I said earlier that I was going to give the classic mindfulness metaphors from the Suttas real quick. One is of just to wrap up loose ends, and then Denny can wrap the show here, right? It's a cow herder after a harvest. So cow herder is sitting there under the tree, under the shade of a tree, and the cows are kind of free to roam about. He's keeping an eye on them, but he's really relaxed now that they don't have to be, don't have to worry about them trampling crops and whatever. Another one is a surgeon's probe. So, the surgeon is getting in there and he's tapping around on things before he operates, just to kind of know where things are at, right? The other one, I don't know if I'm getting this right, is climbing a platform for an overview. So as you're continually moving up this platform, you're seeing more and more of the bigger picture, right? Another one is a classic one is of a gatekeeper, at the city wall, who lets people in and out, like guarding the sense doors. The other one is the hub of a wheel, and what keeps the stream of the world in check is kind of mindfulness. So that's what I wanted to say.
Very cool. Yep. Very cool. Thank you, Josh.
Yep.
Thank you. As you're speaking, it reminds me of the word yoga. Yoga is the English word that comes from the Indian word called yuj, Y-U-J. And one of the variants of the word is called yuk, which is the beam that you put across 2 oxen so that they're synchronized. And so the idea of yoga is really about mind and body synchronized. And so that's what the yoke means. But
yoking,
in a way, it kind of describes you and I, Josh, is that we have to find this yoke between us so that we don't get in front of each other.
Yeah.
I like it. We're developing this chemistry now.
Yes.
That's good. Thank you for your energy in making this a reality.
And likewise, thanks to the great presentation and your dedication to doing this. I mean, daily dedication. And I would say even English speakers can join daily. They would just, just practice along visually, right? If that's possible,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we live cast, we live stream.
Saturday,
we live stream on YouTube and Facebook. So if you want to see my Facebook page, it's very simple. It's dennykmu.com/Facebook. That's all. Okay. And Josh said you can join if you want, or at least join on Saturday 8 o'clock. Okay.
And that's the
English. If you want to be in front
time.
of the camera, let me know. Right? Let me know. So as I mentioned, there are 2 ways to watch David Letterman. One is to watch it on TV, and one is to be live audience.
Yes, and so you can get the idea of the practice in English on Saturdays, and then if you want to hop in during the week.
Saturday is good because I tend to slow it down on Saturday. Okay. We do about 2/3 of what we do on regular days. Yeah. So anyway, okay. Thank you.
And I'm integratingpresence.com and Denny's DennyKmiu.com.
Yeah. So Josh is he actually he has done a lot of podcasts in the past, but I just caught him so that we actually post our podcast now on our Patreon page. So you need to do more, Josh.
Well, I'm posting these on Insight Timer too. I opened a teacher account on there, but it's mostly just to share conversations and interviews and stuff.
Yeah,
that I
so
have.
let me know, and then I'll repost it on the Patreon page.
Sure.
So
And you too,
everybody-
Denny. You need to do it more as well. When we first started this, there was like an explosion of different interviews you did, right? So.
Yes. And we'll talk about that.
All right,
that.
cool.
Yeah. Okay. All right. With that, I'll see you Saturday, and then I'll see you again in a month for this forum. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.